Every Bibles, I'm going to have you turn to two locations. We turn to the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 15. 2 Samuel 15. And then mark that somehow, bulletin, finger, small child, somehow mark that location and turn over to Psalm 55 as well. If you're using a small child to mark it, make sure it's your small child. We're going to read the majority of Psalm 55 tonight. I pray this will be an encouragement tonight. I know a couple weeks ago when I was reading the psalm, it was encouragement to me. I pray tonight will be an encouragement. I will not be long. I know, you're a liar. No, I'm not. I'll do my best not to be long. I only have 37 points. All right, I'm just kidding. I only have a couple. See, it already got better. So you're like, oh, no. That's why there's food in the lobby. It's for an intermission we're going to do. But Psalm 55, let's start in verse number 1. We'll read down. It says, "Give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not thyself from my supplication. Attend unto me and hear me. I mourn in my complaint and make a noise. Because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they cast iniquity upon me, and in wrath they hate me. My heart is sore pained within me, and the terrors of death are fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling are come upon me, and horror hath overwhelmed me. And I said, Oh, that I had wings like a dove, for then would I fly away and be at rest. Lo, then would I wander far off and remain in the wilderness, Selah. I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and tempest. Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go about it upon the walls thereof. Mischief also and sorrow are in the midst of it. Wickedness is in the midst thereof. Deceit and guile depart not from her streets. For it was not an enemy that reproached me. Then I could have borne it. Neither was it he that hated me that did magnify himself against me. Then I would have hid myself from him. But it was thou, a man mine equal, my guide and mine acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together, and walked unto the house of God in company. Let death seize upon them, and let them go down quick into hell, for wickedness is in their dwellings and among them. As for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord shall save me." Now we're going to look a little more here in this chapter, and we're going to see it's mirroring what is happening in David's life there in the book of Samuel, in 2 Samuel 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. This was written during that time in David's life. You're like, how is that encouraging? And look at what he's saying in the beginning and all the things he's going through. The encouragement is found there as we read in that final verse and then on a couple more. But have you ever gotten to a point in your life where you just kind of feel overwhelmed? Where it's just, you're at the end of your rope. Where it seems like every last straw has been pulled. Where the needle that was laid on the camel's back, it snapped it. It's just, you're about to break. You're at your boiling point. Parents, you ever been there? I put my parents there. Matt, I'm pretty sure you probably put your parents there. And then your kids are just returning the favor, I'm sure. Right? We know how that turns out. And I have no doubt someday my children will do even more. Which is why I don't have children right now. Your children are already giving me enough white hair. But here's the thing. Sometimes we just seem like we get to, man, I can't take any more. I am filled to the top. And it just seems like everything is piling on. Usually that's the way it happens. When I say when it rains, usually it's the way it goes, doesn't it? Man, nothing else could possibly get worse than it does. What in the world? God, I've already told you I'm at my boiling point. I can't do anything else. And it seems like he doesn't listen. He just, something else happens. You're like, really? Come on, God. Help me out here. And it just seems like things just keep happening and going. And you look at David's life, and what does he say? He's like, it seems everywhere I go, I'm in the middle of a storm. The wind is blowing. Everywhere I turn, the enemy is coming after me. God, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I could just fly away. You ever gotten to that point where you just want to get away from it all? I think most of us have probably been to that point. I experienced a couple of those moments in college. Anybody who's been to college understands those moments. So you sometimes want, I need to get away. You just bombed the midterm that you stayed up all night studying for. And you get your test back. You're like, yeah, I did good on this one. You felt confident in all your answers. And you got a D-. Come on. And it just happens. Or maybe those of you who, let's say if you own a personal business, and it just seems like everything is breaking at one point. It seems like, oh man, you just got something fixed and something else breaks down. You're on a job site, something else happens. There were moments in my boss's life that I did that to him. His name was Dan Pfeiffer when I worked construction. He was a very patient man, which he needed to be. And he felt in his job, part of his goal was to take some of the younger men in the church, some of the teen guys, and to help get them established. He used his business to a degree, almost like a ministry to us. And my friend Robert and I got hired. Now, my friend Robert and I essentially were gasoline and fire. Anything you put us together, it was going to be awesome. The question was whether it would be good or bad. And generally, it was bad. But he decided that he saw potential in us, and he hired us. I remember the job. We were on June Lane. The house was a green house. We had done the siding. We redid the roof, architectural shingles, all those things, right? And we were learning on the job. We were growing, and we were getting pretty decent at it. And he got to where he could put us on a job and just let it go. And we could generally get it done. It wasn't a major thing, but he'd say, take care of this. We're on it, Dan. We got it. And he would refer to me as Carp or Carpenter. Robert, he was Binder. That was my friend Robert. That's how we were addressed. And usually it was said in that way too. Carpenter. Usually the only time he addressed us. So on this job, we show up, and we're going to be remodeling a lot of the interior of this house. We're going to move a couple walls. They wanted to expand the one bathroom, make it bigger. They were going to move the laundry into a bedroom closet to take care of that room and open that up a little bit. Just some minor things. He said there were certain prerequisites. We are keeping the ceiling. You know, it's the textured ceiling. He didn't want to redo that. He said, I didn't bid that out. Do not damage the ceiling. Dan, we're all over it. We got this. He said, you're going to move this wall. You're going to tear that out. Do not break the bathroom fixtures. We're keeping those as well. I did not bid that out. I understand that more now that I've done a couple like side job things for people. I understand when you bid certain things and when you don't factor in other things into the cost and then it breaks. Oh, no. There goes my profit. So we're working on this job. It was myself, my friend Robert, Dan's son, Ray, was there. My foreman, Bobby Jordan, and Dan was out bidding another job. Dan says, all right, here's what you guys are working on. Go for it. Awesome, Dan. And Bobby was kind of in charge, and he said, Carpenter, talk to me. He said, in this room where we have taken and built and framed in a closet, I need you to make the header, frame all that in together. I said, I'm all over it, Dan. I got this. And so I start working on that. Robert was supposed to go into the other room, and he was supposed to rip out the wall. It was a non-load-bearing wall. It was just cut the studs in the middle, break them off the thing, you're done. Easy job. He said, Ray, you go in the other room, and you put that vent in the wall. We had to replace the vent, like a pass-through vent. Said, done. Easy things. I don't know what Bobby was doing. Bobby was probably taking a nap. So we start working on our respective projects. I hear boom, boom, boom in one room. That's Ray putting in the vent. Turns out it was a little bigger than it was supposed to be. As my dad would say, you beat it to fit and you paint it to match. That was his way of doing construction, right? And so anything will fit if you get a bigger hammer. You can get anything loose if you get a bigger wrench and pipe and just refine it a little bit, all right? So Ray's in there putting it in the way that he would put it in. Next thing you know, you hear a poof, poof. Well, that doesn't sound good. And Ray walks out and says, what happened? Ray, we don't know. You were banging on stuff. He's like, wasn't in there. Well, opposite the wall he was banging on was a utility closet where the hot water heater was, some other rather utility important things. The ceiling inside that room caved in because he was hitting on that side of the wall so hard, damaging part of the water heater, the ceiling, which was not supposed to get damaged. So we got one minor problem happening. Remember, Dan is not here yet. He has no idea. We're like, all right, we can try to fix this. While he is doing that, Robert is still hard at work determining he is going to get this wall ripped out in the other room. He's got a sawzall. Please know it's a reciprocating saw. Usually has a handle, you hold it here, and it has a long blade that goes back and forth, and you can cut through things and angles. He's going to town with one of those. Next thing he knows, water everywhere. Turns out they had run a pipe on the back side of this 2x4, and he had no idea. And he was doing good. Well, turns out he cut that. We have no idea where the main is. There's no shutoff valve in sight. So this room is flooding as we're attempting to find the water shutoff. We finally find it. Now we have to replace a section of pipe as well as the rest of this wall. We're working in water now. That's not good. So I'm like, you guys are idiots. I'm going to go build my closet opening. I walk into my room. Very simple, you know, a typical standard closet size opening, probably 6 foot wide, right, 80 inches tall, you know. I put everything together, the side sticks, the support beams, the header, all of it. I just have to put the little mini studs at the top of the header, you know, in between the top plate. This is done. I put it in there, got my nail gun. Well, there's one that stupid nail that kind of bent weird, so I'm going to hit it with a hammer. But the thing is, I can't get to it appropriately. I'm like, man, I need more leverage. So I take one more step on the ladder and kind of go up and hear a Turns out I was against the ceiling, and I put my back through it, and the drywall just kind of went. Oh, awesome. 3 relatively simple tasks, 3 compounded problems. Dan shows up right about at that moment. Happy. We always knew he was happy because he would pick up Robert and he'd go get a Frosty. He loved Wendy's Frosties. I don't get that, but he always did. I was always mad because I never got to ride in the truck. Air conditioning, get a Frosty. I never got that. I was bitter. I still am, but it's okay. I'll get over it eventually. But Dan shows up, expecting us to pretty well be done with those jobs. Surprise! Dan was a Christian. But at that moment, Dan was struggling. And Dan is kind of breathing heavy, and he turns and leaves. Dan goes. I said, wow. So they start working on that, and I get assigned another task. Carpenter, what? Take all the nails out of that wall. We're saving the wall. We tore off old drywall. Little drywall nails are still sticking out. He's like, tear it off. Okay, I get it. So I'm going through monotonous, the stupid hammer, just pulling out all these annoying little nails. It's in the former bathroom where the toilet was. And I have to get above the toilet to get these nails out. There's no ladder available, and I'm relatively vertically challenged. You put all that together, the logical step is stand on the toilet, pull out nails. Done. So I'm standing on the toilet. And I don't know why, I dropped the hammer. My dad believes in this one law named for his friend named Murphy. And it says if it can go wrong, it will. That was this job site. As the hammer falls, it's like everything goes slow motion. And in my head, I hear myself going, no. And it hits the back cover for the tank and breaks it into 3 pieces. Just, hey, Bobby. Carpenter, you got to see this. He walks in, and he just walks out. Remember, Dan just left because he was irate, which means he's coming back pretty quick. Great time to insert some humor. I have a knack for using humor at the wrong time. And I learned that then. So I pulled out every man's favorite tool. Duct tape. White toilet. Duct tape on the cover. Set it in place. Leave the room. We're working somewhere else. Dan comes back. And you can tell he kind of calmed down. He was almost in a better mood. You can kind of hear it in his voice. And next thing you know, he's in the middle of a phrase. He walks into that room and he just stops talking. Like, I'm picturing his reaction, you know? Albert, you ever had a job like that? Next thing you know, you hear a door slam. Push. Hear a truck start. Vroom. Hear him leave. Gone again. It was one of those jobs where things just kept... I promise you, he made no money on that job. I'm glad I didn't get fired. He was a very patient man. But you know what it was? It was one of those moments where everything just kept going wrong. It seemed like everything just was rolling downhill, and once it got started, it wasn't stopping. And we've all had those moments in our life. You might be in that time now in your life where it just seems like everything is compounding. Man, things were going well, and next thing you know, where did that come from? And when it just seems like, oh, it's got to be on the way out, something bigger even happens. And a lot of times that happens. It might be a negative health report comes when it just seems like things were going well. It might be like the finances took a turn south when it seems like we were finally getting out of the red. Whatever it is, David is in that moment. And I want to look at David's life here as he is overwhelmed, and I want to look at that a little bit. And I want to bring it to a point where I believe hopefully will be an encouragement to you, as was, I believe, David's heart when he wrote this psalm. As I believe in one of his darkest moments is he was just being extremely transparent, but also writing in a way to try to encourage and help others who he knew would get to that point. Because it's a fact of life that troubles happen, that we get to a point sometimes where it just seems like we're getting overwhelmed. Because there are things in life we're not designed to handle, but God can. And that's what I want to take a look at tonight. Let's have a word of prayer, and we'll dive in. I will not be long. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask that you would just guide as we look at this passage. Lord, as David was going through an unbelievable time in his life, and as he cried out to you, Lord, let's examine that tonight. I believe there's a reason you had that recorded and you saved it and preserved it for us in your word. Lord, your word's inerrant and infallible, and it's there, it's for truth, it's for edification, it's to help us. I ask tonight that it would be, and I ask it would be an encouragement. Lord, if there's somebody here who is truly struggling, going through that trial, Lord, they're getting to the point of overwhelmed, that their heart tonight might be just lightened a little bit. Lord, I ask you bless this time. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. I want to look at just a couple things real quick. If you can take notes. I want to look at the fact that there is a reality of a burden that will come into your life. The burden in your life is a reality. The struggle, the trial, the thing you will go through, it's going to happen. And it sounds like a negative, but it's just being real. Talked about this more in the Coca-Cola theme, the real thing. Well, reality check, life is not just a bed of roses. Life will not always be grand. Life is not always perfect. I'm not attempting to be pessimistic. I'm just setting the playing field of saying, let's look at it like it is. Let's call it what it is. As a kid, sometimes it seems, they always say the kid's looking at life through rose-colored glasses. Man, everything's just happy, kids just happy-go-lucky. And then as they start getting older, to teenagers, they realize there's problems. Wait a minute. And then as they get to be an adult, wow, more problems come. And then it seems like, man, seems like the more you go through life, the more you realize that there's negative things out there. And sometimes you realize, man, if I could only go back to, you hear that a lot. Man, I tell you, if I could go back to when I was just 10, life was easy then. I heard that from my parents all the time. You just wait till you're my age. You'll appreciate what you're going through now. Like, yeah, whatever. I call them out. Guess what? You were right. Sometimes I wish I could go back to when it was easy. You know, the kids are like, oh, I'm so tired. Why? What'd you do? I woke up and went to school. Man, how long were you there? Until 3. Oh, then what'd you do? I had to go home? My mom made me take a nap. You poor thing. Then what happened? I took the trash out. Really? How far? All the way to the curb. Like a dumpster? Yeah, a whole bag. Okay. Then what? Maybe go to bed by 9. Oh! Those mean people. Then what happened? I did the same thing the next day. Man, that's terrible. What about your weekend? Oh, I got to play all weekend. But then I got to do it again Monday. And what happens? They're like, life is so hard. Then the reality check happens when you graduate. Some people go to college. Some people don't go to college. Either way, you're still in for a little rough transition point. Don't go to college, what happens? Hey, mom and dad say, good luck, you're going to find a job now. Hey, you want to move out? You want to have all the freedom of it? Enjoy the mortgage payment. Enjoy the rent check you get to write. Enjoy the auto insurance you now get to pay for. Enjoy, and you just list that list. Go to college? Hey, good luck getting a job to pay for all the tuition. Hey, enjoy signing for that student loan. Hey, wow, that never happened back when I was 5 or 6. The hardest thing I had was to decide what I was going to play that day for recess. Now it's I wish during my work day I got a recess. Right, we got to that point. Man, I wish I got that long nap that they forced the kid to take. Somebody make me take a nap. You're forcing yourself not to take a nap. You're trying to stay awake. And it just continues to go that way. The thing is, the reality is, burdens will come into your life. Job 14:1. It says is that man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. Isn't that the truth? It says man that is born of woman, which is every man, is a few days and full of troubles. Diseases, disappointment, death, delays, all those things are just a common part of life. I'm making it really, really bad here. That way it's really good at the end. But I just want you to think about it. Put it on that level. Understand life is not perfect. Life is not fair. Disappointments, things that way, are a fact of life. It's not just in somebody's imagination. Sometimes people will be like, oh, you're so exaggerating your problem. If we were to step into their shoes, would we really feel that? When you have a problem and you tell it to somebody, do you want them to think that you're exaggerating it? Or do you want them to truly try to understand what you're going through? I don't know your story. I don't have your checkbook. I don't know your family situation. I don't know your health. And you don't know mine. A lot of you know that I gouged my head wide open the other day. But we find that more funny than anything. But the thing is, some people are truly going through big health crisis right now. I don't know what you're going through, but I know that you might be. You don't know what I struggle with every day, but they're there. Because we all have it. David here had some serious struggles. At this time in David's life, a major event is happening as Absalom is turning the heart of Israel away from David as the king. Absalom here, who in those chapters in 15, 16, is going around the countryside recruiting everybody against his own father. And David here, as he flees from his own son taking over his kingdom. Think about what he is going through. That's why when you read as he says it, he says, if it was an enemy doing it to me, I could take that. He said, I could reason that away. He said, but it's the people I trust. It's my own family that is going against me. And that's what was just making it so overwhelmingly hard for him. And he couldn't understand because it was his own family doing it to him. He was going through a struggle. His burden was a reality. But I want you to notice there is a reaction you can have to the burden. I notice a reaction. First of all, I believe it's a positive reaction that David had here in chapter 55. Look in the first two verses of 55. What does he do? He says, give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not thyself from my supplication. Attend unto me and hear me. I mourn in my complaint, and I make a noise. His first reaction was to pray. He said, God, I'm complaining, but I'm doing it to you. Have you ever been to where you just had a little complaint session with God? I've had them. Maybe it's not theologically correct and sound. But you know, I've had those moments. God, I don't know what else to do. I'm just coming to you. I don't even know how to say it. Here, I like how he says he just made a noise. He's like, ugh. I can just picture him. He says, God, I'm complaining to you. Oh. I can picture him here. He's in that anguish where he doesn't even know the words to say and describe what he's going through. You ever been to that moment? It's beyond words. Where he's just, oh, that's all you can do. Just make that deep sigh. David here is at that moment. David here is at that point. And he says, give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not thyself from my supplication. He's coming and said, God, if there's ever a time I needed you, this is it. He said, I'm praying, I'm crying out to you, attend unto me and hear me. Saying, God, everybody else I trust and love has turned their back on me. Will you hear me? I'm praying to you, I'm crying out to you. He had a positive reaction, but you know, as he continues to go on, as trials will do in your life, it's going to test all your emotions. Trials have a tendency to test every single little hot button in your life, and it brings you to a personal decision and approach and reaction to your burden. Very often, especially when it's something on a very personal level, it touches you in all the places that is so hard, that hurt the most. David here, as he's saying, he notices, look in verse 3, I believe the first reaction you see from him is he has fear. Very often that is a natural personal reaction to a trial and a burden in your life is fear. He says, because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they cast iniquity upon me, and in wrath they hate me. My heart is sore pained within me, and the terrors of death are fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling are come upon me, and horror hath overwhelmed me. He's being very transparent here, and he's saying, I am afraid. They're after his life here. He's been run out of his own kingdom by his own family. And he's saying, God, I'm just being honest with you. God, right now, I am afraid. You know, it's okay to be honest with God. God knows. You're saying, like, well, God, I don't feel so good about this, but I'm trusting in you, God. And we do the spiritual prayer. And God's sitting there, he says, I know you're afraid. You're my child. God says, just talk to me. God says, you don't have to try to put up the front with me. I know you're afraid, and it's okay. You know, sometimes your children will come to you and they're afraid. You usually don't get mad at them. Sometimes you say, hey, it's just, there's nothing in your closet, it's okay. But Dad, the boogeyman. I think he's real. I haven't nailed it down yet, but there might be something to that. But you know, sometimes kids, they get scared. And you know what's nice? When you can turn to your parent and you know that it's going to be okay. What does it really do when a parent checks under the bed to see if there's a monster there? What does it do other than, in the heart and mind of that child, bring some calm and peace? Knowing that mom and dad checked it out. Knowing that the person they trust, the person they know can handle the situation, looked at it. Why? Because big bad dad checked it out. When I'm scared, I get to Jim. I say, Jim, in my office there's a monster in my closet. And Jim went and looked. And you know what? I felt confident after he did that there was no longer a monster in there. Jim handled it for me. But if you think about it, usually what happened? My dad's bigger than your dad. And you know what? Even though sometimes in the middle, right in there, its instant reaction is fear, the true reality is God is bigger than your problem. Sometimes it is so hard to know that in the middle of it. Because the natural reaction is to have that fear. Wait, what did the doctor say? Wait, we're how much in debt? Wait, that bill was how much? And that initial personal reaction, it's fear. But try to remember, God's bigger than that. And in it, you can cry out to him. David said, God, I got nowhere else to turn. I'm afraid. Hear me. It gave him that little bit of comfort knowing he could cry out to his heavenly Father in the middle of his trial that was happening in his life. But that reaction there of fear, let's look at another reaction he has a little bit down in verse 6. And I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove, for then would I fly away and be at rest. Lo, then would I wander far off and remain in the wilderness. He said, what I would do, if I had wings like a dove, I'd fly off, I'd go out in a remote area, and I would just camp out. I'd stay away from it. Sometimes it's nice, like, you know what? I just want to get away from it. I get out and just avoid the noise. Out in California, in Lancaster. Lancaster's a desert. When I went there, the first time I ever got to California, I decided, all right, I'm going to go to West Coast Baptist College. Everybody told me I'm nuts. Nobody from my church had ever been out to the West Coast. I said, whatever, I'm going to California. I'm sure Kayla kind of went through the same thing. You're nuts. California's crazy. It's going to fall off. The earthquake's going to kill everybody out there and the whole, all right, whatever. I'm going. Maybe that'll help, right? So I get out there and I say, all right, going to California. Beaches, palm trees, surfing all day. That's where it's at. You know, I've seen pictures of California on TV. I know what it's about. I get there at nighttime. I never visited the campus, and their video for the college at the time lied. The guy that was talking, he was like, come to West Coast. He was walking on the beach. Right? I'm like, awesome. I'm going to the beach, to college. Yeah, suckers, I'm going to the beach for the... I get there at nighttime, I drive in, there's lights all over the city. I'm like, this is awesome. I fly into LA, the light's going forever. You're like, woo, woo, this ain't Michigan anymore. I wake up in the morning, I look outside, it's a desert. All right, what's this about? Where's the beach? And I find out the beach is like an hour and a half away. I've been lied to. And I realized it's just a desert. But you know what I got to realize after a little while? I appreciated that. Because sometimes I was just able to drive off into the desert and just get away for a little bit. Sometimes it'd be nice and calm, nice and quiet. Just drive out a little bit. There's nothing there. And just take some time alone. And David here is at a point, he says, you know what, I just need to get away from the noise. I need to get away from all the problems I'm seeing. He said, I can't even look at it anymore. You know that thing that's broken down? You're like, I don't even want to look at that car anymore. I've been there with my vehicles. The thing is, sometimes you just want to get away. David here, he says, I just really wish right now I could be a bird. I'd fly away. I'd go out in the desert, and I'd just stay there for a while. You know, it's not, I would say, wrong to be at that point, because sometimes we just want to get away. Our natural reaction is we're fearful, and because of that, we have a tendency to want to fly away. We experience fear, and then we experience that feeling of flight, where it says, man, I just want to leave. I just want to get away from it. I just want to leave it behind. Sometimes people act on that. That's why you have a lot of marriages that somebody just runs away from. Because they experience that fear in a relationship of failure, and then they fly away from it. Instead of stay there through a hard time and work on it. Sometimes with a family, you'll see that as it falls apart. Sometimes in situations it'll be that way. People just, man, I'm just leaving it behind. Here, he experiences that feeling. He says, I just wish I was a bird. I'd fly away. I'd leave it behind. Because God, right now, I am afraid. You ever been to that point? Where not just afraid, you're to the point, man, I just wish I could drop it all and just get away from it. David's at that point here. Look at verse 8, and we'll read on. He says, I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and tempest. And then he gets to another stage. He's been fearful. He's had the feeling of wanting to just flight. He just wants to get away from it. But then look what he says. Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues. For I have seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go about it upon the walls thereof. Mischief also and sorrow are in the midst of it. Wickedness is in the midst thereof. Deceit and guile depart not from her streets. You know what he gets to now? He's at a point where he wants to fight back. At the point where you just get angry after you've been afraid with a situation. Then you just get frustrated. You want to get away. Then you're to the point like, what in the world? You get angry about it. I believe David was at that point as well. This was testing every range of emotions that David had. He says, destroy, O Lord. Look at verse 12. It said, for it was not an enemy that reproached me, then I could have borne it. He starts to think about the situation a little bit, and that's what's really driving him nuts about it. He says, if it was an enemy, all right, I can handle that. And he says, neither was it he that hated me that did magnify himself against me. Then I would have hid myself from him. He says, it's not even the guy that really hates my guts that's doing it to me. He said, then I would have just left him alone. I would have just gotten away from him. What does he say? He says, it was thou, a man mine equal, my guide, mine acquaintance. Like he's talking to them. Think about those that turned their back on David at this time as Absalom is leading the rebellion. Those in his military even that were joining with Absalom. The provinces of his country that were coming under Absalom as he spoke to them in the beginning of chapter 15 in 2 Samuel. Turn to 2 Samuel 15. Keep your point there in Psalm 55. 2 Samuel chapter 15. It says, and it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. And it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, of what city art thou? And he said, thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said unto him, see, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. And Absalom said, moreover, oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. What's Absalom saying here? People are coming to the king with grievances, and he's saying, oh, well, if only I were king, man, I would hook you up, is what Absalom's saying to these people here. He said, the king, he doesn't even care about you. But now, if I were king, I'd have your back. David's own son, the one that's completely undercutting his authority, the one that's trying to wrench this kingdom away. And that is why David here is struggling with it. He said it seemed like the thing that would be the last one to do it is what's causing it. Sometimes it seems like the things that are weighing most on you are some of the things that are closest to your heart. And I've spoken to some people. I've spoken to my dad. I love my brothers. I love them like crazy. But a couple of them are away from the Lord right now. I know that weighs heavy on my dad's heart. I've spoken to him. And I know it's hard for him to bear it. When he has to hear some of the things my brother says or what he's talked about and brags about doing, and it breaks my dad's heart. I know some of you in here, I'm sure, I've talked to as far as I know that have children that are a way that it just breaks your heart to see. It's hard to experience that. Maybe they have a relative, a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, somebody that's not saved, and it weighs heavy, and it's a burden and it hurts, knowing that. And sometimes it's the thing that's the closest to the heart that causes the most pain. David here, knowing his family, and the things that have already happened in his family that are weighing on him. About with Amnon, about with Tamar, about all these things that have happened in his life that weigh on him. And he says, my heart is broken. He says, I wish I could get away from it. And he gets that feeling of even fighting back to a degree. And he talks about why. But I want you to notice what David gives us here. Lastly, I want you to look at the release of that burden. You know, the Bible says to cast your care on him because he cares for you. The word cast means to literally let it go. fishermen, you understand what cast means. Cast does not mean just to set it. When you cast, usually you don't just go bloop. Cast means, there it goes. You know what God says? I don't want you just to walk over and set it down, because your tendency is going to be standing there to look at it and pick it back up. God says, I want you to take it and I want you to cast it. He said, I can catch it, and I can keep it, I can handle it. He said, let me have it. God says, you have a problem? I want you to give it to me. He doesn't say, well, if you can't handle it, then cast it on me. No, he says, cast. Let me have it. And David here, I want you to notice in verse 16, the transition point. As I believe as David is writing this, I believe he's writing it to help others that are going through a rough time to be able to handle it. Notice if some of you in your Bible, you'll notice the Psalms as they have a beginning point there. And it says, to the chief musician. And it specifies who the psalm was maybe written to and why it was written. This psalm in 55, it says, to the chief musician on Neginoth. I'm assuming I'm saying that right. You can disagree with me. That's fine. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But the next word there, mashil. That word implies teaching. It implies instruction being passed on. The idea here is David is writing it. He is writing it to help somebody. The idea of it is to teach through this. He's pouring his heart out, but he's hoping it's in a way to help somebody else. He's hoping that somebody else who's going through a hard time will read it and be blessed by it. I want you to notice 4 things about David's prayer here as we close. Verse 16 says, as for me, I will call upon the Lord. Notice the phrase, he says, and the Lord shall save me. I believe this was a very courageous prayer by David. In the middle of his fear, in the middle of his anxiety, in the middle of everything he was experiencing and feeling, and the emotions out of control and going through, he said, as for me, I will call upon the Lord. He said, everything else be as it may. All the people going behind my back, be as it may. My family undercutting me, my son trying to destroy my kingdom, all these things happening. As for me, myself, what I can control, I'm calling on God. You know, he didn't say, as for me, here's what I'm going to do, and he lays out a plan of attack. So often that's what we do. That's my tendency. I'll say it that way. I don't say we, I'll say me. That's my tendency. Wait, what's the problem? All right, here's how we fix it. I'm learning more and more, especially in marriage, that when women have a problem and they tell you about it, it's not for you to fix it always. That's hard for me to understand. Sometimes my wife wants to tell me about a problem, right? And I say, here's your solution. And all of a sudden, I'm the bad guy. Hey, wait a minute. I just fixed it. I don't want you to fix it. What? But it's what I do. I fix things. And as a guy, I didn't wrap my brain around it. Then I understood. I just want you to be there. I just want to know that somebody's listening. I want to know that somebody cares. I want to know you have emotion. I still don't fully wrap my brain around that because I'm a guy. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but it's true. My mind isn't wired that way. But what I try to learn is that, you know what? All right, I don't need to give you a solution, but I am here. And you know what? God is there. Even if you ever at a moment you just say, I just want to vent. God, I need somebody to listen to because nobody else will. God will. And you know, God has a solution. No matter what problem you go through, He does have a solution. But you know what? God's there just to listen to you as well. And sometimes we think, man, there's nobody to listen to me. Have you tried God? Because He will. David here, he says, you know what? As for me, I'm not going to try to fix the problem even. He said, I'm just going to call out to God. He will save me. You read that in verse 16. Look at verse 17. It says, evening and morning and at noon will I pray and cry aloud, and He shall hear my voice. Here, as he's going through this trial, you notice he didn't just pray one time and figure it was going to be good. Well, God, I'm bringing you this problem. Take care of it. Then he goes on his way. Then the next day, man, God still hasn't fixed this problem. God doesn't care. You know what he says here? He says, evening, morning, at noon, I'm crying out to God. That problem that you might be going through, and I'm not trying to diminish it, but if it's very, very serious and sincere to you, how many times have you brought that to God? You say, this is just weighing on me. I have all this trouble right here. How many times have you truly brought it to God and said, God, it's yours? Not brought it and expected an immediate result, but just said, God, you're in control. You can handle it. Because often we come to God and we say, God, here's a problem. We expect him to immediately get on it. God, you need to fix this. God says, why? You don't understand my purpose in it. I don't want to fix it right now because there's something for you to learn or you can grow here. But how many times have we brought it to God? David said, morning, noon, evening, God, I'm crying out to you, and he shall hear my voice. He still understood that no matter when he cried out to God, God would be there and would listen. He woke up in the morning and that thing was still nagging on his mind. God, I need to give this to you. At noontime, it came back and he got, God, I need to give this to you. In the evening, he was stressing about it. He's like, God, I need to give this to you. It was his constant thing. He said, God, I don't want it. God, if I focus on it, it's going to overwhelm me. God, I need to give this to you. God, I need to give this back to you. He starts focusing on it again, and he says, God, I need to give this back to you. And that was his constant prayer was, God, just take it. God, I'm casting it. Because things have a tendency to creep back in, unless my mind is the only one that works that way. I find I have a problem. I say, all right, God, it's for you. Amazingly, I find myself worrying about it again in about 15 or 20 minutes. Maybe you're not like me, but I think there are probably several people that are. You know what I have to find myself trying to do at that time? God, it's yours. I'm sorry, I tried to take it back. I know you can handle it. And what happens another 15, 20 minutes later? I find myself trying to fix the problem again and worrying about it. I say, all right, God, and David said that. He said, hey, I'm going to constantly and consistently give it to God. You know, his prayer was a very confident prayer as well. You look at verse 18 and 19. He hath delivered my soul in peace from the battle that was against me, for there were many with me. God shall hear and afflict them, even he that abideth of old, Selah. Because they have no changes, therefore they fear not God. What does he say? God shall hear. He had confidence in God. He said, that's all right. God will hear it. God has my back, if you will, to paraphrase. He said, God can take care of it. And you know, no matter what you're going through, God can take care of it. You can have confidence in God. The Bible talks about confidence in an unfaithful man and how it's like a foot out of joint. God is able to have confidence put in him because he is faithful. The idea there is like the boss who tells the worker that is just totally incompetent to do something, and amazingly, it doesn't get done. He put that confidence in the unfaithful worker. It's like, come on. It's like all it does is really hurt and hinder him. It's like a foot out of joint. How many people have had a socket out of joint before? I have never been there. You know, I've never still to this day broken a bone. I have like the world record for a number of staples and stitches and stuff like that. But I've never broken, where's wood, right? Or whatever. No. I know, not knock on wood. But here's the thing. You can have confidence in God. And you know what? He'll never let you down. You know, I've sprained my ankles before and I went to take a step. I was like, and it was like I was right down. Or you try to grab something with a hand that's been burned. You forget it's been burned. And it's like, wow, what in the world? You know, God will never do that to you. Where you go to put your faith and trust in him and it's like he burns you. Or like you like, wow, what in the world? Why did I put my trust there? God will never do that to you. Any trust and confidence you put in God, he is faithful. God is faithful. And David here, in verse 22 and 23, you notice lastly, he says, cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to be moved. But thou, O God, shalt bring them down into the pit of destruction. Bloody and deceitful men shall not live out half their days. But I will trust in thee. He said, cast thy burden upon the Lord, he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to be moved. What are you doing with your burden? Are you casting it truly on God? It's almost to some degree in my own life, and maybe in yours as well, sometimes becomes a cliche. Yeah, I cast my burdens on Christ. But really what I'm doing is I'm trying to take care of it myself. Instead of saying, God, you can do it. We tell our college students, trust God. God will take care of it. And so often it's like, well, Well, yeah, God, I trust you, but I need to, and we fill in the blank of what we have to do to really fill the problem in. Well, of course I'm trusting God for it. But here's my 9-point plan to get out of it. This became real to me in college. I had a school bill comes due. And what happens when your bill comes due, you need to pay the money. If you don't pay the money, you don't get to go to school. Reality check, right? It's like a mortgage and other things. It's like they're trying to teach you something about life. And so I have a bill that comes due. I believe my bill was a total of like $12.84. So that's a good chunk of change. But for a college student, right? You can barely buy a hamburger. Yeah, almost $1,300. Help me. And there was no way I was coming up with that money. My parents are far from loaded. They're not coming up with the money for me. So, what does my dad tell me? Trust God. Well, yeah, of course. That's what I'm doing. But what do I do to get the money? He's like, Nathan, listen to what you're saying. What? Trust God. I am. But what do I do to get the... And it was like, it wasn't clicking for me, right? I said, Nathan, trust God. I said, how much have you prayed about it? And I'm within like a couple-day window of being asked to go home and not being able to be at school. And I'm like, well, I'm out here trying to train to serve the Lord. You think he'd provide? He would. And I was like, okay, I'll trust God. I knew the job wasn't going to suffice it because I didn't exactly make $1,284 in 2 days. That'd have been awesome. I said, all right, God, it's up to you. I'm just going to keep working. I'm just going to trust you. I pray about it. You take care of it. I get a phone call the next day. It's Dr. Rasmussen's office. He's the vice president of the college, I think. Big dude. He's been here before. He's like 9 foot tall, big old guy, right? He calls me. He's like, Nathan, I just wanted to tell you some encouraging news. I said, I love encouraging news. Usually I get a call from somebody way up. It's because I'm coming in for a meeting because I was stupid. Share with me encouraging news. I long to hear it. He said, I wanted to let you know, somebody just applied $1,000 to your school bill. I was ecstatic. I said, right on. You know what my mind immediately started to do, though? Man, how do I come up with the $284? Right? My mind immediately went there. All I got to come up with is $284 now, and I got this. My mind went right to that. It's like I wasn't even super grateful for the grand. I immediately went to my own plan to take care of it. I call my dad. I tell him. He's stoked. He's ecstatic with me. I said, I totally trust God. I said, yeah. Trusting God, and here's what I'm going to do to get the rest of the money. And I went right back to it. I get a call the next day. Dr. Rasmussen's office again. I'm thinking, oh, awesome. It was a secretary. Thought I'd let you know there was a mix-up. The money was supposed to go to a different Nathan. So the money hasn't been applied to your account. I'm like, really? And you know what? I talked to my dad about it. He said, Nathan, just trust God. Sometimes things happen. God hasn't changed. His plan hasn't changed. God is still faithful. And I didn't want to hear it, to really be honest with you. I was frustrated. I was fearful I was going to be kicked out of college. I was at a point where I said, it cannot get taken care of. I've now been disappointed on top of it and been on an emotional high and then dropped low. And I said, this will never get taken care of. My dad just says, trust God. I prayed. I had one of those sessions with God where I just kind of let him know I was frustrated, that I didn't understand what he was doing. But then I told him that I trusted him. I said, all right, God, but it's up to you. And now my deadline's even shorter. But I need it. I get a call from the Dean of Men. Usually, those calls were never good for me. Brother Weaver calls me up. How you doing? Well, I guess as good as I can be. He said, hey, I heard about what happened. I want to let you know I'm sorry. And I said, technically it wasn't my $1,000 in the first place. And so I can't get upset. It's not like somebody stole $1,000 from me. I never really had it, and now I just don't have it either, so I'm not much I can really do about it. And he said, I appreciate your attitude. At least you have a good attitude about it. Praying for you. I appreciate that. He calls me back the next day. I'm a day away from my deadline. He says, I just wanted to let you know, somebody walked into my office a couple minutes ago, handed me $1,000, said, give this to somebody that's had a good attitude lately. Promise you. He said, I want to let you know I put that on your bill. And somebody wrote a check for your remaining $284 and paid it off. You know what that did for me? in one of my lowest of moments, it told me God loves you. You may not have the answers. You may try to figure it all out. You can't figure out God's plan. God has it, though. Trust him and watch what he can do. And that changed me. You know, I graduated, I didn't owe $1. And I promise you, you look back at my work record, it wasn't because I had the best paying jobs in the world, but I had an unlimited, resourceful God. And it just had to teach me, trust him. So I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what is in front of you that seems like it cannot happen. I don't know what deadline you're up against. I don't know what your burden is, and I don't know if you're feeling overwhelmed, but I tell you right now, there's a God that can fix it. There's a God that can handle it if you just cast it at him. And there's a God who is saying, let me have it, because I want to help you. And I can tell you from personal experience, he doesn't let you down. Sometimes he makes you sweat a little bit, but you know, it's to grow you. I never would have learned what I could have learned if God would have given me a way myself to work my way out of it. But when God let me have that faith to trust him, and he came through in a way that you could never have scripted, I can trust God. No matter what comes, I can trust him. And I want to tell you, you can too. So the question tonight is, are you feeling overwhelmed? What is it that you could say, God, I don't have the answer, but I'm trusting you for it. God, I'm fearful right now. God, if I could and I had wings, I'd fly away. I'd be so done with this. I'd go out into a desert place. I'd be just gone. God, I'm angry to a degree because it just seems like the closest things to me is what's really working on my heart. But God, I trust you. God, I'm giving it to you. I'm going to keep giving it to you. And I'm confident that you'll come through. And I'm here to tell you he will. So the question is, will you give it to him? And then watch what he can do. Every head's bowed, every eye is closed. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for the life of David. Lord, he was far from a perfect man. But Lord, he was a man, I believe, that loved you. A man after your own heart. And Lord, even at his lowest point, he knew he could come to you and cry out to you. You would hear him. Lord, I believe there are those in this room who are truly feeling overwhelmed. Lord, there are broken hearts in this room. Lord, there are those who are burdened. There are those who don't know the next step. But you do. Lord, there are those who are hurting and can't handle, it seems, what they have, but you can. I ask that you would allow them to give that to you. That they would truly have that faith to trust you for the answer. To lay it at your feet. And Lord, when it comes back and they begin worrying about it again, to once again bring it to you. And to continually cast that care at you. Lord, you care for them. Lord, in my personal life, I know how you've come through for me, and I thank you for it. And Lord, I apologize for the times I haven't trusted you like I should. Lord, there are those tonight I believe need to make that same prayer. Lord, I ask that you would just work in this time of invitation, work in hearts. Lord, help people to trust you to come through for them.